Hello and welcome to Focus on Scholarship. I'm Carrie Cooper, Dean of Libraries, and your host for today's session. The Graduate School and the Library have a shared goal of bringing focus and awareness to the exciting scholarly and creative achievements of our academic community. Our guest today is Vic Kappeler, professor in Eastern's Department of Criminal Justice and Police Studies. Vic's 9 textbooks are commonly used by universities worldwide, and he is recognized as a leading scholar in media and the social construction of crime, police deviance, and police civil liability, among other related fields. His textbook, Community Policing: A Contemporary Perspective, is in its 5th edition. He currently serves on the editorial board for Criminal Justice Review and reviews articles for 16 other academic journals. In 2008, Dr. Kappeler was the recipient of Eastern's highest teaching honor, the Foundation Professorship Award. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's start out by talking about your the collaborative process between you and Larry Gaines. Together, you've authored 2 textbooks: Community Policing: A Contemporary Perspective and Policing in America.
Well, it's somewhat of an interesting story from an EKU perspective. So many of the articles and journals and scholarship that's published have social relationships embedded within them. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, Larry Gaines was a professor at Eastern Kentucky University and the chairman of the department where I currently serve as the chair. I was a student of Larry's, and he was the chair of my thesis. I did my doctorate at the same institution that Larry Gaines took his doctorate at. And after Larry retired, he took the chairman's position at Cal State at San Bernardino in the criminal justice department there. When I first graduated with my doctorate, Larry invited me to co-author a textbook with him called Policing in America. There are very few textbooks in the field at that time. And Larry and I began a collaboration in writing and scholarship that's been over 30 years in the making, and that was one of our very first projects.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Thanks for sharing. I actually have a copy of your theses right here. We actually bind and put those on the shelves in our library. But the exciting thing is that in 2010, we're really looking forward to implementing an online repository for our student and faculty scholarship. How do you think that may impact our future graduate programs and doctoral programs?
Well, I think that process is very, very important for a number of reasons. First off, just as a researcher, just to have access to thesis and dissertation is very important because it's often a very overlooked area of research, and it's hard to access, more difficult. Since everything's been put on the web now and the internet, electronic access to that information is important. But it's also important for students that they have their research recognized. Dissertation thesis, because the publishing process is so long, there's so much delayed gratification in publishing. It may take 2 or 3 years before a textbook comes to print, or a couple of years for a journal article to come to print. Thesis and dissertations often reflect the most current available research, and to be able to have that online to access as a researcher is wonderful. And then to acknowledge students' contributions to the bodies of knowledge, for them to become cited in the journals and the textbook is important for the institution and the careers of the students who do those theses and dissertations.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. We think they're going to really enjoy having those papers and that research that has traditionally been sitting for safekeeping on a shelf actually be out there and accessible. So we're excited that you think so too.
Oh, absolutely. Wonderful project.
You delivered a presentation last spring, Policing in the Post-9/11 Era, Continuing Conflicts Between Rights and Security. How has policing in America changed since 9/11?
Well, that's a couple-hour lecture at least, but policing is, the history of American policing has always followed the changes in the political economy and changes in society. And like everything else, change is rapidly increasing. It is becoming much more difficult to trace the origins of those changes. But basically, the first 100 years of policing in America was fairly static, and a revolution occurred. The next era, a reform era, happened, and it took about 50 years. The community policing era, which Larry and I write about, was only about 20 years long. So the most current era of policing is the post 9/11 era, or the international and national security era. That may have a very, very short lifespan, but the dramatic change has been from kind of an internal domestic focus to an international focus. So many of the police agencies today are building partnerships internationally, particularly with concerns over terrorism, immigration, national security. So policing is becoming technologically driven and global. We're moving into a surveillance society, a lot of information gathering, information mining. So probably the technological changes and the external vision, external focus is the dominant themes that have changed in policing since 9/11. Obviously, the civil liberties concerns and safety concerns are often at odds with one another, but it's been a dramatic change in a very short period of time.
Sure. Your collective work of scholarship and record of service are very impressive. What advice do you have for new faculty coming to higher education who think, I'm never going to get all of it done?
They're probably right. I mean, that's the way a career should be, I think. You should have so many ideas and so many projects you want to work on that you could never actually complete them. The problem is that with all these wonderful changes in information technology, the expansion of the role of the professoriate and changes that have occurred, make it very difficult. You know, the myth of Ottoman New England with the professor with patches on his sleeves, smoking a pipe somewhere, chatting with students is really, really a myth. Academia is very difficult work. Probably for a new faculty member, the best thing they can do is find a good mentor to help them navigate the maze of journals, the politics of publishing, the review process, and to really understand that the first 5 or 6 years before you become tenured, it's a very demanding, very, very demanding job, and to have a mentor or a guide to help you navigate that or to map it out for you is important. I think probably the other thing is not to take yourself too serious, because while you can take your work serious, if you put your ego into your work, the journal review process can be often brutal, and if you can't develop somewhat of a professional detachment, it's very tough when you first start out.